Casa De Klub. I like that. Nice.
Hey, we like that too, coming at you, something so brand new. We in a new stew, and the vibe so true, kinda like a Cy Young, he had to go grab two. He with that Arizona Wildcat, in that upside down hat, and how many have I had staying with me? Round two. It's the price of admission on the Casa.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of CDK. We're here with San Diego Padres pitcher Michael King. Really excited for this one today. What's up, Mike?
Appreciate you guys inviting me out here.
Yeah. Start off. So tell me a little bit about the clinic you did yesterday, who it was for, how it was set up, how you got roped into it, all that kind of stuff.
Andrew Miller set up a clinic. It was for hurricane relief on Davis Island. Obviously, I got affected by it, and so it hit home with me. The MLB Players Trust, I've been an ambassador for the last couple of years too, reached out, said if you're willing and able, come in and talk to the kids for a little bit. Worked out with them, ran them through some like defensive drills. It was just fun to see them and have some laughs and some smiles. And I didn't even think about it, but Andrew was telling me like a lot of these kids got out of school because of it or couldn't play baseball because of it. The field that we were on was under 2 feet of water. So it was just good to see them smile and have some fun.
I think it's a cool side of, what some guys do during the season, in the season also, but, you take a chance or take some time with your free time and, give the kids a chance to kind of have a cool moment as well.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I didn't even. Did you know what the MLB Players Trust was when you were playing?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't until like a couple years ago when they reached out to me to be an ambassador, and like obviously it was Andrew Miller's idea, but MLB Players Trust put together all the funds for it and the organization of it. Brought out a bunch of coaches, reached out to a bunch of players. So Mania was there, Pete Alonso was there. There's some good representatives.
Yeah, they make
so
it really
cool.
easy.
Yeah. What is that exactly?
The Players Trust?
Yeah.
It's basically they have a bunch of funds, and they obviously have their own goals and events and whatever the community service they want to do. But if a player reaches out to them, they can provide funds and help your specific idea. So it's not like they're just an organization that's out there just trying to get kids involved. It's like you can physically reach out and say, hey, this is what I'm passionate about, and I would love for you guys to help me build my dream of helping X organization or whatever it is. So they've been great for me. I started my own foundation last year, and they were like influential in getting that off the ground. So they've been good to me.
It's cool to see. I feel like most players have some sort of foundation now or involved in community service in some capacity.
Yeah, so my wife's type 1 diabetic. So I basically knew what I wanted to get into, but then I needed to see Judge's Gala every year I go up to. And I needed to see like guys before me and how they went about it in terms of networking and getting funds and finding really cool people that now make me like hopeful that type 1 diabetes is not going to be a thing in the future. So I know like obviously Sheila has it, and it'd be great to have Sheila never have type 1, but even if you could just prevent it from the next generation, like we don't want our kids or our kids to get it. So it's really cool.
So you're in Tampa throughout the off season. What does that look like? Have you been here every off season since being with the Yankees, and then you just go out to Arizona for spring training in a couple weeks here?
Basically, yeah. I was renting down here in Tampa. I'd say it was the year going into COVID was the first time I rented in Tampa, and was just at the Yankee spring training site. Bought down here a couple years ago. And of course I think I bought in like July and then got traded in December. So
Always
I had I was planning on just staying in Tampa the whole off season throughout spring training. I also got traded a week before I got married. So there was a little crazy off season there. And then found Suco, which is right down the street from here, and been working out with a bunch of good dudes. It's a good atmosphere there, and it works out.
So fresh off it, I have the stat here. It says of the 201 eligible players, 17 did not agree to terms, and they had to exchange salaries, you being one of them. For all the people listening, and I don't even really understand how it fully works, the arbitration process. Kind of walk us through that with San Diego, fresh off it. First off, congratulations.
Thank you.
How does all that work? Because it's super unique compared to any other sport. Like nothing's like it.
Did you ever go?
No, I signed my deal before I ever got to arbitration.
Lucky dog.
It's a very complex process, and it's not a fun process for player or team to go through.
Yep.
Meaning you signed a long-term deal before you ever hit your third year of arbitration?
So you either get to arbitration if you're a Super 2 after 2+ years or after 3 years. And then you have 3 years or 4 if you're a Super 2 of arbitration.
Gotcha.
Gets complicated there. But I mean, the arbitration process is basically you, your agent, the union comes up with a number that they think you are worth. The team comes up with a number that they think you're worth. And you try to settle on a number that's, I don't know, I guess advantageous to both sides. This year, unfortunately, we didn't get really close. So then you file. I say what I think I'm worth. Team says what they think I'm worth. In a couple days, they'll set a date for when the hearing actually is. And at the hearing, you got 3 arbiters sitting there. They're not really affiliated with baseball. I think they're lawyers. I don't know who.
I believe so, yeah.
And my agent will present my case. The team, whoever their representative, presents their case. And that's where like it could get a little ugly for other players. I have no idea how it'll be with me. This is my first time going to hearing. But like the team's supposed to try to devalue you, and they're trying to convince these 3 arbiters
you're not worth what you say you
Wait,
are.
so you haven't done this yet?
No. So you settle, I think it was January 9th. That's like the settle deadline. And if you don't come to an agreement on a certain number, if you're too far off, and like these 17 guys are further off than they would like to be, then each side sets a number. And then the hearings are between like January 27th and February 11th. So they set a date, and it's in St. Pete right here. And then, yeah, you just go and present your case, and you just sit there and wear it with whatever the team says to you. Mm-hmm. But you hope that your agent or your side is more convincing. And then whatever, it's not like the arbiters decide what number you get. It's like you settle at this, they settle, or they file at this, and they pick one number, basically. You have to prove that you're $1 more than the midpoint. So
those 2 numbers out there right now? The 2. So that's so it'll be one of the 2.
One of the 2.
So I just said congratulations, but nothing's happened yet.
It's okay. If I lose, then you look like a douche.
I have heard though it gets super uncomfortable when the team's just looking at you and telling you exactly how they feel. But what percentage of players go through that process, would you say?
Well, more get to trial now, because I think more, if not every team now, basically takes a file and trial stance. Whereas like when I was playing with guys who were going through it at that stage, that were like I came up with, a lot of the teams would still negotiate up until the trial date to try to avoid going to a trial. And I think now, I'm not sure what the reason is, but now most teams, if you don't come to an agreement by the deadline, negotiations are off basically, and you have to go through the whole process.
I just heard it's like they want to stick to that deadline. So if that deadline doesn't actually mean anything and you can continue to negotiate for these next month, then why would you have to settle on that specific day? Yeah. But my agent talked to me about a couple things. Like you have other guys where they'll either settle a 2-year deal, and who was I just talking to that it was basically like, yeah, you're an ARB1 and you settle for ARB1 and ARB2, and you don't have to think about it for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's like a way of kind of getting around the system of the what'd you call it? File and trial. And instead of just like negotiating that ARB1, you can still get a multi-year deal.
And what numbers are they looking at, the team specifically?
I think.
How do you decide what the
every
number
player
is?
has comps that what their historical basis is for what they've accomplished to that point in their career is similar to what you have, and then that your team is going to pick out players that they think are your comps, and your agent is going to pick out players they think are their comps, and that's where you look through the history of it, they come up with those numbers.
You look at ERA, you look at WAR, innings pitched, start as a starter.
It's very statistical based, right?
Very statistical based, because you're basically just trying to find a guy that filed or settled this year, the year before, however recent, that has very similar numbers to you, and he got X amount, so that's why you deserve X amount. And whether your numbers are a little bit better, you deserve a little bit better, or a little bit worse, you deserve just under his number. So I think my case was just different because I was a reliever for my first
I was going to ask you
4 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you look at the guys that I'm similar to this year, they all have like 400 more innings than me. So it's obviously I feel like I deserve
it's a unique case.
Close to that, but I also am coming from a different number. So we'll see how it is.
So in most cases, would a player go off of 3-4 years of substance, whereas for you became a starter in 23, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you have like a year and a half to go off of. So you're trying to find guys that have done that, or you just put yourself up against a starter and his last year and a half of stats?
I don't want to give my secrets
There's
away.
probably some of both who are, right?
But both, yeah. Because like there are still starters that you can look at that had some injuries in the past, so their innings are actually similar to mine, even though they have 5 straight years of being a starter. And me being a reliever, my innings and bulk is a lot less than everybody else. So you can look at those types of guys, but then you also, what I'm trying to do is just see guys that I was similar to this year, and they got X amount of raise, and I think that I deserve that because I had the same year as them, and it shouldn't matter. Like they're going to be coming from a much higher salary, so their total salary is going to be a lot higher. But I feel like I deserve the amount of raise.
Hope that didn't
to overcomplicate it all basically is a lot of it is built off of what you earn your first year of arbitration to then determine the raises that you get the next 2 or 3 years after that.
There's so much criteria that goes into it. Mm-hmm. And then what's crazy about it is once you see if you won or lost the case, they don't give you a why. They don't say you lost because the team proved this, this, and this. So then you know, like, or at least the agent would know, or you the next year, you know that you have to prove these things that would convince the arbiter.
More likely.
So you're just left with no answers.
You're just left with no answers, and you're sitting there like, okay, I guess they just had a better argument somehow, or whatever it was.
So you never got to free agency either?
I did get to free agency. I never had to go through arbitration, though.
Gotcha. So you signed...
Did you sign after your second year? Like you had 2 years of service time and then signed?
Just over 2 years, I think, yeah.
Was it because it was after your first Cy Young?
I forget. Yeah, it was after 2014.
And then when was your second one?
2017.
Also in that same deal?
Correct.
Stud.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Maxed out all the escalators of the second one.
Oh boy.
What clicked for you in 23, becoming a starter? I was talking to Wellesley about it too, because he got to be a part of that there at the end of the year.
He was like my personal catcher down the year there. I missed throwing to him.
Love that. Shout
out. But I honestly think, and now I'm going to go back to Kluber here, in 21, and I've told this story so many times, he threw his no-hitter in Texas. The day before that, he was watching one of my bullpens, and I had one of the worst sliders known to man. Obviously, you're looking at one of the better slider ballers, Kluber balls ever. And so he was watching one of my bullpens. I was throwing these trash sliders. He gave me like a little bit of a grip change and a cue. And I threw the first one, and on TrackMan, it actually had the movement that I wanted to. And I was like, okay. And then the next day he goes out there and throws a no-hitter, and I'm like, all right, Kluber knows what he's doing. Wow. So I gotta try to master this pitch. Took me a couple more bullpens. I got into like a low leverage situation and threw it in a game, and it had the movement and the profile that I wanted. And I think the first one I threw was a swing and miss. So I started to really develop a slider, and I think that allowed me to be able to flip a lineup. I basically was just a fastball guy, could mix in a changeup, really bad slider that if I commanded was okay, but the movement of it was not good. So then towards the end of 21, I felt like I had a starter's arsenal. And then in 22, I was still pushing to be a starter, but got hurt halfway through the year. And then again in spring training in 23 was pushing to be a starter. And because I was coming off an injury, Boone was the one that was telling me, like, we almost want to like limit your innings here. We want to make sure you're okay. We don't want to then jump you from the 50 whatever innings I had in 22 to a starter's workload. So I felt like I had the arsenal at the end of 21, and then really didn't get a full opportunity until 2023. Unfortunately, the Yankees had some injuries, and I was in Boone's ear the whole time, just asking for an opportunity. I ended up trying to phrase it as like, make me an opener, and then wouldn't let Boone pull me from a game and be like,
let me keep going.
I'm going to third inning now. Now I'm going to fourth inning.
Yeah.
So I was obviously very appreciative of Boone letting me do that. And ultimately it's got me to where I am. I think it obviously got the Yankees Soto in that moment too. Like the Padres needed starting pitching. And if I was still a reliever, I don't know who else they would have traded. But I think it ended up being a win-win for everybody.
Is that, when you say slider, is it that sweeper pitch that Corey won't claim that he invented because he's very humble?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone says he did.
When you were throwing, like, prime Kluber days, it's probably you, Ottavino, and Chaz Rowe that had the elite horizontal.
I would say theirs was much more of a sweeper. Mine had horizontal and vertical. Theirs was more of like what guys throw now is like a true sweeper. That's,
I wish we had TrackMan back then.
Yeah.
But like you had it towards the end of your career, and you were getting negative vert on your on your sweeper.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, who did you just come up with that grip on your own in pro ball before you got into that?
How I threw a breaking ball. I mean, I wasn't smart enough to try to think that.
He's gripping it right now.
Yeah. I wasn't smart enough to think that, I'm going to make this pitch move more that way. It's just the way that I gripped a slider, and, it was kind of a evolution of a pitch that I learned in college, because the curveball that I threw when I got to college was really, really bad, and it played in high school, didn't play in college, so I had to figure something else out.
It worked, but that was his. So the Yankees tried to coin the whirly before sweeper became a thing, and the whirly grip is much more on the two seam. And every time I threw that, I felt like I was trying to throw a curveball, and so I would manipulate arm slot, and it just never came out right, and it was 75 and super loopy. And then the grip change that he had, and I don't know if you remember, the cue was like, feel like you're shortening your stride a little bit, and it almost made me climb at release, and so I was able to still keep my fingers on top of the ball. And like the first one I threw had late bite to it, and it's worked ever since.
How many guys you given your secrets to? What made you give Michael King the blessing?
I had to earn his trust.
Yeah.
Did you just see
it took him 2 months to get there, but no, I mean, I think Garrett and I were watching your side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting behind him, and if you sit behind him and you watch him throw, you can see that his ball goes that way so easily, but he was almost trying too hard to make it go the other direction because he pronates it so well. And so I was just trying to think about, if his ball moves to his arm side, it's because he's getting his hand into a certain position. So instead of trying to manipulate something different the way he does naturally, just change the grip and give him like a different cue, so he's not out there trying to like force the issue. And
it worked.
Got lucky.
Mind blown. I mean, it's huge for you too, going into free agency next year. Now you're a starter, completely changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I can imagine, you play baseball your entire life, and now you're going into free agency next year. Like, how do you deal with that outside noise going into this season?
I've seen it from a lot of other guys. Like, if your main goal is to win the game that you're playing and not care about your stats then kind of take care of themselves. My college coach taught me that. Yep. And then Judgy was the one that was like the main guy that I saw in 22 when he hit 62 home runs? Mm-hmm. And he turned down a decent size extension in spring training or whenever that was, and goes out there and it's like he's just playing, wanting everybody around him to be as good as they possibly can, and wanting to win baseball games. And instead of forcing that pressure on himself and having to put up numbers to get more than the extension that was offered to him, or it came natural to him. So I'm obviously on a very talented team, and I thought we had a really good team last year, a good chance, and I know we're going to have another good chance this year. So as long as I'm out there trying to win baseball games, I'm hoping that the stats just speak for themselves, and then we'll see where we're at next year.
What does it look like going from the Yankees to another team? Because everyone says the Yankees, it is different playing for the Yankees. Did you always see yourself in New York moving forward, and then getting traded in one of the bigger blockbuster trades with Juan Soto being involved? What was going through your head in that time? You had just become a starter. It was probably encouraging for you. New San Diego wanted you to start a lot of games for them.
Yeah. I think it ended up being great for my career. If you look at my numbers, my April and May were not very good. And because I only had a short stint with the Yankees as a starter, they could have easily just tossed me back into the bullpen. And I don't even know. I might have been back in the bullpen again, if I was with the Yankees. So I think the Padres gave me more of an opportunity there, but it was hard. I met my wife in New York. We went to Boston College together, but we didn't start dating until New York. All of her family's from New York. My whole extended families are big Yankees fans. They're up in Rhode Island now, but my dad's a Boston fan, but he became a big Yankee fan. Now he's a Padres fan.
Back to Red Sox now.
Yeah, Red Sox and Padres now. But it was hard just leaving all them. What was great about coming to the Padres, I came with Higgy, who was catcher that obviously he knows well, caught his no-hitter. And he's an awesome dude. I had him in the minor league, so I had familiar faces, obviously with Brito and Vasquez coming over with us. We signed Wandy Peralta, Tyler Wade's there. So I had a lot of ex-teammates that were on the Padres. And then, like you said, the difference between the Yankees and other organizations, Padres showed out. The stadium's incredible. The fans were incredible. We had a crazy payroll in terms of how talented the guys were on our team. So it's not like I was going to this like small market, no fans. Like we sold out a ton of games. And
I think one of the unique things about San Diego is that the Padres are like the only show in town now.
Only show in town. Chargers left. So now it's, and I like, you could feel it. Like those playoff games were nuts. I pitched in one playoff game with the Yankees before that, but like, especially when the Dodgers were in town, it's a different atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's fun. So going from that Yankees atmosphere and the pressure of being in New York to San Diego, I was thinking it was going to be a lot less and less media and not as much coverage, so you can just kind of play free. It was, you got fans still booing you if you didn't play well. It's still baseball. So we had an awesome team, and it felt very similar. I'm sure like you've been in different clubhouses. Was it that much different in New York?
It's hard for me to say because there's still very much COVID regulations.
True.
The year that I was there, so there was no media in the clubhouse, none of that kind of stuff.
Nice.
That people. Oh, yeah, it was great. It's fantastic. All we had to deal with was Zoom rooms. And, it was great. So I feel like my opinion of the circus of the Yankees probably isn't as accurate as some.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that each team has its own sort of. They all have the different pressures of their fan base, of the media. Like they're all locked in. I think the Yankees is just because the size of the market, people make a bigger deal of it.
Of course.
I would have imagined the Padres fans would be a lot nicer though than Yankee fans.
Oh, they definitely are.
After a bad outing.
They definitely are. But like I still remember we got swept by Colorado, and obviously Colorado did not have a good year last year. And I pitched that. It was either the third game or fourth game. It might have been a 4-game sweep. I pitched that last game, gave up like 5 runs in 4 innings. It was not good. And felt the boo birds out there. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming in and getting asked about it in the media, and I was like, these are New York media questions. Because if I gave up a lead when I was on the Yankees, I was getting booed as I came off the field. And I actually like it because it's again that you can add that pressure of knowing that like you're letting down a whole fan base if you lose this game. And I deserve to get booed in that game. So I think that's also like the easiest way to get over it. Like instead of again feeling the pressure of the boos and being mad that fans are booing you, it's like, no, I deserve to get booed. I'll be better next game and prove that you can cheer for me next time,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of it's pent up because the Dodgers too. You guys got a real rivalry now. You heard all their players say that was the World Series when you guys played them. You guys are going to battle for the next decade.
Man, I felt like we had them, but I mean, their team's incredible. Especially that top 4 in their lineup. And I know Freddie basically won them the World Series. I felt like Teoscar was the one that dominated us in the DS. But like they're a good team. And obviously they're going to continue to spend money. I think adding Snell and Ohtani coming back is even more dangerous because I felt like their starting rotation might have been the only thing that we could have exploited in the playoffs. And they all dominated. They're a good team. We had them in the regular season, but it doesn't mean anything, Like I think we won the regular season. You call that record?
Regular season series. Yeah.
Regular season series. But doesn't mean anything if you can't beat them in the playoffs.
Well, went to 5 games, right?
Yeah, we were up 2-1, and then lost game 3, 4, and 5, or game 4 and 5.
Did you find any adjustment period with the? You hear guys talk about Arizona, Colorado, those places with the thin air. Obviously, you rely a lot on movement, and the ball doesn't move. Pitching there more often. Did you have to go through anything with that?
Honestly, and it was our bullpen catcher, Peter Somerville, was the one that brought it up to me. The first time I pitched in Colorado, I changed my whole arsenal. And I was like, I noticed that my 4-seam still had a decent amount of ride and my changeup was okay. But my sinker and sweeper had nothing. Like I know I think it's like an average of 17 inches of horizontal on sinker and like 18 on my sweeper. And I was getting like 8 and 8 both sides. So it was a good 10 inches each side. And it's also like a mental game where I'm throwing it and I'm seeing it not move. Right. And I'm almost seeing Higgy think that it's like a cutter coming in at him when I'm trying to throw a sinker. And so I changed my whole arsenal and did not do well. And I remember being like, even when you're in Colorado, if you're throwing an elite sinker, it's going to get more movement than everybody else that throws like their average sinker relative to Colorado. So Arizona's obviously not as elevated. But yeah, I'll throw a sinker and turn around and see it's 12 horizontal. And I'm like, this isn't going to be good. But then I'm still realizing that I'm getting on fists of righties because they're used to 9 inches of horizontal in Arizona or whatever it is. Yeah. So I just needed to stick with my own game plan and not pay attention to the numbers. Even like throwing bullpens in Colorado, it's almost demoralizing because you're like, where's all my stuff? But you just have to kind of get through those series and try to keep them on the ground as much as possible because the ball does fly there too.
So are you saying your ball moves more in Colorado as a pitcher? Less.
Way less. Because of the thin air. That's honestly why I love throwing in San Diego. It's right at sea level. Marine layer comes in, so it's like thick air, and that's when the seams get picked up and shoot them. Where in Colorado, it's such thin air, it just rips through without really having any wind helping the
I've never heard
physics,
that.
Tyler.
I've never heard that. I just thought it was the ball flew there. That's why pitchers didn't want to.
Well, the ball flies. The gaps are humongous.
Yep.
But also the ball doesn't move as much. Side to side, it does up and down, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It's technically really the only thing that doesn't get affected is gyro spin. So if you have really low efficiency pitches, they don't get affected. And if you like think about a gyro pitch, it's supposed to not move. Yeah. So like I remember Dylan Cease, his slider's incredible, and it's a gyro 0-0 spin. In Colorado, it's still going to be a 0-0 spin, but he's got elite vert, and so this is again relative to everybody else. In Colorado, his vert was like 14-15, which is kind of average. Yeah. Whereas when he's in San Diego, it's 20-22. Okay. So, but then when I throw my four seam in Colorado, it's 10-11. So he's still getting 4-5 more inches of ride than like the average four seam.
Mm-hmm. You following? I was going to say, when did pitchers start talking like this? Because you saw the swing.
This is 100% the new way that guys do it. Like,
what did it used to be when you were coming up, when pitchers are talking and there's no vert and numbers to go off of?
I think it's a lot more based on feel and like, even though he's spitting out numbers, he also knows what the pitch looks like to him when he throws it well. He knows what it feels like when he throws it well. So I think the numbers are just much more of a tool to help you to ensure that things are where they need to be, as opposed to, well, I shouldn't say as opposed to, because I think a lot of guys now use it as that's how they evaluate if they're, whereas to me, it wasn't how I learned to pitch as much. So it was much less of an evaluation tool and more of like a supplemental thing if I needed to dig deeper into something, then I could go look at the numbers.
Which is honestly the way it should be. Because there are a lot of teams and players that don't care about like the knowledge of a pitcher and knowing like a situation and having to pitch to the situation or even command both sides of the plate. It's like they're just going to go up there and throw their best stuff because they learned via TrackMan and Edgertronic video how to make the pitch move as much as possible. And so now you have these guys that are up there, like we used to call throwers, like you had a pitcher or a thrower, and their stuff's incredible, but they can't get out of these weird situations, and it's because they don't know what pitch to throw to try to get this guy on the ground on the pull side or whatever it is. So I think that there's a balance of it where you need, I don't want to call it old school teaching, but you need like the basics to be taught at a younger level to instill that, to then be able to try to manipulate pitches and make your stuff a little bit better.
I think that's what makes a catcher like Higgy, who understands how to read hitters and set guys up and things like that, makes him more valuable now, because a lot of pitchers don't learn to pitch that way. You know, they learned a guy swung a miss at this pitch, I'm going to try to do that again, but make it nastier, as opposed to maybe there's a different way to go about it, or a quicker way to get an out, or, you know, get a ground ball in a certain situation, things like that.
I don't know if you had did you like always have a specific catcher for the year, or would it be the two?
A lot of the times, yeah.
I think that like that relationship is huge, and I think makes or breaks a staff. And I remember, and I'm going to shout out Brett Sullivan. I was pitching against Milwaukee this year, and I'm very much into my scouting reports. I love reading swings. I have like almost full sequences that I like to throw to certain guys. And I'm in Milwaukee. I think it was the second inning. I gave up like 5 blue hits that were like just so unlucky, that were hits. Gave up like 5 runs in that second inning. And I was so pissed off. And I come into the dugout, and I always go over the next three batters. Sully came up next to me, and he asked me, "What do you want to do to the next guys?" And I was like, I don't care. Didn't even want to like pay attention to it. And I realized that like seconds later, okay, that's probably the wrong thing. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, dude. All right, let's go over them." And he's like, "Hey, you figure it out. I got you." And knowing that I had a catcher that could like coach me through the game, and I didn't have to worry about scouting reports, I could then think about my mechanics, or think about just getting back into that competitive mindset instead of like a poor me because I just gave up soft contact hits. is huge. And Higgy was incredible for me this past year. Wellesley was awesome the year before. So I think that the catcher relationship makes or breaks the whole pitching staff.
Yeah.
Are you on the higher end of like intaking all this information?
Oh, yeah.
Compared to other pitchers, like you like all this stuff?
I mean, compared to other pitchers, I don't really know. 'Cause, like, if you look at Joe Musgrove's notebook, he's got everything going. Darvish has like tons of notes on different hitters, and Darvish has freaking 13 pitches. So it's like he has to almost figure out which ways to.
He's probably
to
got to
throw guys.
eliminate certain pitches for certain guys.
Yeah,
right?
and he throws like a hard slider, a slow cutter that are like look like the same pitch, but he's a totally different feel, and it's based on how the hitter's going to react to different pitches. So there are definitely pitchers out there that don't want the information and want to just be competitive and not thinking. And I definitely I think my confidence comes from knowing the whole of the hitter. Where like when I'm sitting there on the mound and I got bases loaded or it's a big situation, the crowd's going nuts. Instead of my mind wandering to like, ooh, this is a big situation, my adrenaline's pumping, I can say, all I got to do is execute this pitch to this location and this guy's out 100 times out of 100. And that gives me the confidence to like flip a lineup or get out of sticky situations. And so far, knock on wood, it's worked for me. But
who's one player that you have trouble finding that one out pitch, like a player that just doesn't have that many holes?
I mean, I've had a few. I don't know about you, but Devers has my number. Ohtani's gotten me a bunch. Trey Mancini got me a ton. I don't remember getting Trey Mancini out. There was one time I had like the greatest pitch I've ever thrown in my life, and that was the only time I got Trey Mancini out. Yeah, I got a few of that. And like Ohtani's hard because you'll look at a full scouting report, you'll look at his last 25 at bats, you'll look at his last 100 at bats, and he'll swing and miss at a certain pitch. But then like 2 games later, it's a home run on that exact pitch in that exact location. So then you got to look at sequences of it. And it's like guys like him don't really have holes. You just have to sequence properly and make sure that you're not on the same page as him. And like Mookie's a similar hitter too, where if you get him out in a certain pitch or certain sequence, he's not going to let you do it again. Mm-hmm. And there are guys that you could just throw the exact same sequence every time and they're going to beat it into the ground every time or chase that pitch every time. But those elite hitters are the ones that are really hard to try to get off the same page with. And then you don't want to be playing your own mental games of like, oh, he's probably sitting this, so I got to throw this. That's, again, where Higgy or a good catcher comes in because they also have that feel.
For sure.
It's probably mind fuck knowing that Ohtani's a pitcher too.
Oh, yeah.
So he's probably on the same page.
It's kind of the same thing with catchers. Like when I know a very good defensive catcher, when you're facing like Salvi, and you know that he's caught so many different sequences and pitchers, and he can probably look at me and say, oh, this guy's arsenal is similar to this guy. So if I have no idea if he's a guest hitter, I don't know these types of things, but if I know Higgy would say like, yeah, I was sitting on this pitch because I know that this is a good sequence to throw, and he set me up for this.
Set somebody up.
And that's like the mental side of the game that I think makes baseball so much better than anything else because
definitely
you can't
get in
just
your own head too. Because I feel like sometimes you could be facing a defensive catcher who's not necessarily a great offensive guy, and you're trying to think along with what he's thinking, and you outthink yourself, and you end up throwing him a middle fastball, and they jump on it,
or like walking him, and you're like, what am I doing here? Like he's hitting a $150 for a reason. He's just a good defensive catcher, but yeah, they still get you. They're big league hitters, you know.
I mean, look what Salvi's done. Obviously, he's a great hitter, but I feel like he's gotten better the last like 4 or 5 years.
Oh yeah. And I think obviously the Royals are really good this year, and their staff. Like I felt like their staff played a lot better than what they should be playing because you just got so much confidence in what that guy's putting down. You know.
I wanted to touch on this, circling back to Wellesley. What does that look like with catchers on the topic of all this data? How much prep goes into your start on game day with the catcher? And it's just crazy to think catchers that play 130 games, how demanding it is because they have to be on the same page as every single pitcher.
That's the main thing because I do a ton of homework and I don't know if I would have enough time to do another pitcher.
Right.
And so obviously they're doing just general scouting reports, but then you need to know like Kluber's okay throwing this pitch, or you got a reliever coming in and he's strictly fastballs, but how do you get a good fastball hitter out when a guy comes in? It's such a crazy thing to me, catchers and how they understand the strengths of the pitcher, but also can kind of incorporate it with the weakness of the hitter.
Yeah. And you gotta know what each pitcher wants out of you as well. You know, you could have somebody that shows up the day of their start, and you know they just want to go over a game plan really quickly, and then they'll go out there and you might talk a little bit in between innings, and then the other side of the spectrum is somebody like Garrett Cole, who's extremely demanding of their catcher, you know, wants them to be more prepared than he is and to basically know what he's going to do before he does it. And you got both ends of the spectrum, but not just for starters, also relievers. You know, guys are getting called up, sent down. You got to learn them. If you haven't seen them before, it's tough.
I think it's incredible, the catchers that are in the minor leagues and they get called up. And now, like, their first game up there, they're catching Garrett Cole. And then you got these horses coming in out of the bullpen, and some of them you've never even caught in a bullpen before.
Right.
And now it's in a big game, big situation.
You got 6 warm-up pitches to learn them.
You get 6 more. Yeah. My debut, Romine was my catcher, and he met me on the mound, and I came in the 7th inning or whatever it was. He said, all right, what do you got? And like, I had to tell him what pitches I had that day, or not that day, whatever, just while we're on the mound. And I remember saying, I'm like sinker heavy. And my first few, I don't know if it was nerves or wind or what, my first few sinkers were cutting. And he comes back into the dugout after the inning and he's like, bro, you're throwing me cutters the whole time. And I like, so now I'm like front hipping righties when I'm trying to go like down and into to these righties. But it's a hard game. Obviously they get beat up, but I think that they're a catalyst to every team.
I think the mental grind is as much as the physical grind for them.
Oh yeah. But then they also, like, because they're a position player, they have the relationship with the pitcher and also hitters. So like, they're the ones that obviously they make great managers in the future.
So many,
Like they're underappreciated.
Especially young catchers though too. Coming up, you don't want your guys shaking you off. But I feel like that's what makes Austin so good, is those uncomfortable situations. He just seems a little bit more comfortable.
He's such a good personality,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
So like you like him even if you felt like you were on the wrong page. And that was something I fully respected with him. He wanted to get to know why I would shake him off. So in between innings, we'd come in and sit down, and before I even went over the next 3 hitters, he'd be like, hey, you were set up. I thought you were set up for a slider in this count, but you shook to whatever pitch. Why? What were you seeing that I can now see in the next one? So we get on the same, on the same routine and can really get in rhythm. And now it's like, there were a few times when he was catching me that I'd kind of shake off the first pitch and know that he knows the second pitch that I was going to in the sequence, and start my delivery before he even called the second pitch. And he knows that it's one of these two, and he was in between. But like, once you get that relationship with the catcher, it's second nature, and it just becomes like a much more fun game when you're
thinking together.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you were with Jan there towards the end, you wouldn't even shake him off, right? You guys were just on the same page.
I never shook much in general.
You're crazy.
But
why?
So to me, I feel like if the catcher and I were on the same page and prepared enough, that I should be able to execute whatever he throws down, because I trust that he has a good reason for putting it down.
And so when would you actually shake?
There'd be like certain times where maybe I like 100% felt like I want to throw this pitch right now. But most of the time I would not really, not that I wasn't convicted in a certain pitch, but I didn't necessarily feel like I could only, I guess, throw one pitch in a certain situation.
Yep. You also had like a crazy arsenal. So that's why I'm wondering why you would never, like, I would get it if you were like a 3-pitch guy and whatever. You had towards the end of your career, you had what, 6 pitches?
I just feel like it came down more to execution than the actual pitch itself.
Which you're probably right.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Sale said? He doesn't shake ever?
I think Chris has actually said he's never shook.
I saw a thing that it creates doubt in both him and the catcher's mind, which makes sense, because like, as soon as you shake, you're like, was that actually the right pitch? And there are so many times where I battled with Higgy a few times where Higgy would shake me off. Like I'd shake him and he'd put it back down, or like I'd call a pitch because now we got the pitch comm, and he'd like sit there and I could see his little smug face just be like, no. And then he'd call something else. And so that right there is like, he was doubting what I did, I was doubting what he did, but and then you go back to it and I shook off a pitch and I throw something and it's hit for a home run, and I go back in the dugout and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Why did I shake you off right there? And then there are times where he shakes me off and I punch the guy out, and I'm like, thank you for making me smarter, or like realizing that I was being an idiot in that situation.
It comes back to, like you said, the relationship, the preparation, and even if you are shaking, disagreeing, it comes back to the ability to talk about it afterwards and understand why, so that you're on the same page the next time.
Yep.
You're getting buzzed right here, right? It's in the hat. All the pitchers?
Yeah, it's a speaker, so it'll actually say like 4-seam fastball up and away.
That is bizarre.
Yeah.
Is it ever too loud to hear what it's saying?
Plenty of times. Yeah. Did you get that at all?
Yeah. So you see guys now, like they'll, I mean, not often, but
you cover it.
They'll cover it with their glove to try to drown out like the noise. But I can imagine in San Diego during a playoff game, 2 strikes, crowds all standing, cheering and stuff.
Yep. And then you got the pitch clock, so you can't like try to quiet the crowd or step off to try to like whatever, or you can't be like standing there not hearing anything and then go and like try to raise the volume because the crowd's going too nuts because you're on the clock. So it happened to be in the playoffs. I think it was a 2-strike pitch to Ohtani. And I couldn't hear. Well, I could hear that something was coming out of the thing, but I couldn't. And I covered it, and I'm like telling Higgy to go again. And I realized that there's a second on the clock. So I just threw like a sidearm sinker in the right-handed batter's box because I was like, I don't want to take a ball and what happens if Ohtani just like swings at a pitch that's 2 feet off?
Yeah.
And Higgy was calling a 4-seamer away, and I threw a sidearm sinker that he then caught it like this and looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? But I just couldn't hear him.
I'm sure pitchers like that though, right? Because you can't get picked anymore. It's pretty much just tendencies or tipping pitches.
Yeah.
It's the only way it can get you.
Yeah, I think teams devote a lot more resources now to picking up on tips as opposed to trying to steal signs.
100%. But it's also like I think it's a much faster game because Higgy would throw me the ball back and I wouldn't even be on the rubber. The hitter wouldn't even be in the box, but he knows the sequence that we want, and I hear it in my hat. And so now it's like I don't even need to get on the mound, wait for a sign, and then come set. It's like we both are already on the same page, and now I can almost like visualize the pitch, even though I'm under the constraints of the pitch clock. You know what's funny now though is I've noticed, or at least from my experience, is that the people who used to be good at picking up pitches from a pitcher, now they turn their attention to a catcher, and a lot of times they can pick it up from the catcher.
Meaning
catcher tips.
If a catcher calls a fastball, he's going to do a certain thing before he sets up. If he's going to be set up inside or outside, he's going to move a certain way before he gets in there. And then that's what guys look for now, because obviously you can't steal signs anymore.
And then you would just have someone in the dugout or on deck say like a verbal.
Especially if you got a man on second and the runner at second. No, I didn't realize it was even a thing. And now because the pitch comm can be, is it 5 position players' ears? Like you can see tendencies.
You can see guys move in the
of
field.
like, the shortstop took a step to his left knowing that it's going to be an off-speed pitch, so he's probably going to pull it or whatever it is.
What's the difference there with the pitcher and catcher? Like the way the catcher sets up, just because there's a buzzer in the hat. What's the difference with
No, it's not that. It's more of like
it's what they pay attention to.
Yeah, because they're not paying attention to the actual sign that's getting put down.
Gotcha.
They now can see every time he puts his left knee down, it's an off-speed pitch. If he puts his right knee down, it's fastball. Or he always puts an elevated target and it's a deke every time. So elevated target means it's off speed. And so now if you're a runner at second and you know that 80% of the time when he goes elevated target, it's off speed, that's when you can get some tips.
You're just saying they're looking at stuff that they never used to look at because they were just looking.
They may
at
have used
signals.
to. I think it's just I was never aware of it. Is what I was saying, because I was always trying to be aware of, like, are they looking at a guy's signs, not are they looking at the way he's setting up, or which way is a second baseman moving, that kind of thing.
Fascinating.
We had like a couple times with the Yankees, and I remember you could see it with Volpe. You know how Volpe would always do that little like hop before he stole? First baseman would have the pitch comm in, and picks are on the pitch comm. So like the catcher gives a pick, and it'll say like whatever, pick off. And the first baseman's standing there right next to Volpe, so Volpe can hear in the hat that it says pick off. So now instead of Volpe doing any of his like funny jump stuff, he'll just be standing on the base. Pitcher comes set and throws over, and Volpe's still standing on the base. So teams have learned, and I remember like Rizzo would never wear it when he was playing first base, and you're just playing the game like you normally would. But and like I know the Padres, the first baseman would never wear it just because you're so close to both the first base coach and the base runner.
Mm-hmm.
What do catchers say about that? The way the Yankees steal bases. How do you combat that?
I think a glove drop pick was huge because they're trying to jump to gain ground, but also gain that momentum. And so if I lift as they're jumping, now they're going every time. But then you put a glove drop pick in, and it's me not even paying attention to the runner at first. I just come set looking at the catcher, and as soon as the runner jumps, catcher drops, and that means their full momentum is going towards second base, and I go turn and pick. So it's obviously a game that you play, and I ended up seeing some of those guys, instead of jumping to gain ground, they'd actually jump straight up because they're not trying to take the bag. They just want to see if you're going to glove drop pick. And you'll see like a jump straight up, and then they go right back. So I mean, that another lost art is hold the running game. If you just try to make pitches, throw it as hard as you can and move as much as you can, you're not really trying to be a sub 1.3.
Even more so because you're only allowed to pick twice.
Yeah, true.
So you have to be able to change times, to different deliveries, this or that, be quick. Yeah.
It is impressive, though, that they've been able to stay consistent with it, because we tried to implement it at Arizona, I think, because
that way, stealing bases.
Yeah, because I think they start Austin being in the system. You know, they were watching the Yankees a lot, our coaching staff at Arizona, and no one could do it. I mean, we would practice it, we would work on it, and then in the game, it just like no one could do it.
It's hard. Tyler Wade is one that I think is an awesome base runner, and he was teaching a bunch of the guys on the Padres just like a lean. And so instead of doing that, it's like you lean, and if you get too extended and the guy hasn't pitched yet, you just come back to center and you do your normal thing. But if you're leaning and you're waiting for that movement, you can still kind of hesitate and go back. But Wade could get as many bags as possible. And it's really just, he doesn't have to get a huge lead, which is, again, more things that I didn't realize was a thing. If the pitcher doesn't have a quick pickoff, you can get a 15, 16-foot lead because you know you have enough time to get back. Where if a guy's like a sub 1 pickoff time, you got to keep that lead short. So he'd say like, yeah, this guy's it's a 1.5 pickoff time. So he'd get a 15-foot lead, which is already 2 feet further than the average. And then he does his lean. So now he's got the momentum. It's crazy the amount of data that goes into random things that you won't, as like an average fan, you won't see.
All right. Thank you to Michael King, San Diego Padres pitcher, for coming on the Casa De Klub.
Appreciate you guys. Had fun.
Thanks.